Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for episode 32 of Cage Side Convos. I am Rick Huntsman.
And this is Quince.
We're coming to you guys live, as always, from American Top Team here in Watertown. And today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about repetition and the inevitable boredom that kind of comes with that.
Sure.
Right? So one of the things you always talk about the importance of consistency and repetition. You know, whether you're in the weight room, whether you're training on the mats, you're writing songs, playing music, whatever. You never get it. You know, you're not going to get anything on the first try. Most people don't, right? So you have to practice and you have to put in reps. You know, and kind of the Bruce Lee mindset is it takes 10,000 hours to perfect a skill, 10,000 repetitions, and that's a shitload of repetitions.
A lot. It's a lot of time.
So it's easy to get bored and for that to get kind of stagnant.
Sure.
You know? And I guess one of the things for me, really, the only thing that I've found, the most effective thing I found, I guess, to overriding that boredom and repetition is that just kind of being goal oriented, you know, and understanding that to get up the flight of stairs, you have to walk up each step. You know, you don't get to skip steps. You know, maybe you take them two at a time and try to get up there faster, but you still have to do it multiple times. You know, and obviously, if you get bored and you quit, then you're never going to get there.
Right.
You know? So that's kind of one way. As far as everybody talks about the daily grind, and I personally don't look at it that way because I think that just the daily grind sounds boring and miserable already. But it's it's kind of a necessary evil. Boredom, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when people get bored, and speaking of myself as well, they view it as maybe they're doing something wrong, or maybe sure. And once that boredom strikes, they, like you said, they quit and they change their focus to something else, and they give up altogether. But truthfully, boredom really is part of that natural process. Right. What comes after, because repetition, of course, helps learning, helps to learn. But through that repetition, the mind does catch this sort of lull.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it starts to drift a little bit. I know with, trying to memorize a song,
right.
You go through it a handful of times and you notice it, you get better and better and better. But then there's a certain point at which you're messing up things that you knew before.
Yeah.
And the mind starts to drift a little bit. And, you have to keep in mind that when you are using your mind in such ways, whether it's repetition, like, over and over again with things, or even if it's multitasking, and the mind is constantly switching focus, you're using a lot of, your brain is using a lot of energy, or burning a lot of glucose. Sure. is really what it comes down to. Sure. And that, as the mind gets tired, the mind starts to drift, and that feeling of boredness starts to come in.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean that that's the end of the process altogether, but it means you need to rejuvenate the mind. Right. You need rest. Or what a lot of people aren't used to doing is allowing themselves to be bored.
Sure.
I think that's one of the main issues, and why, cell phones and Netflix and, booze or whatever else is so prevalent, is because people don't allow themselves to be bored anymore. They think that's something that's a negativism.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot there, and I want to come back to that. You kind of touched on learning and something what I call the point of diminishing returns in the learning process. I do want to circle back to that in a little bit. But as far as the allowing ourselves to become bored, right? So sometimes boredom can be taken as our mind's recovery period, right? So in the weight room, we don't get stronger while we're lifting. We get stronger when we recover from lifting, right?
Sure.
So a lot of times this boredom, it allows our mind to play. It allows our mind to process the information that we've been taking in all day, right? So what I've started doing to allow my mind that period to rest instead of constantly being stimulated, and that constant stimulation leads to anxious feelings.
Yep.
It leads to sleeplessness. It leads to chronic fatigue. There's a lot of negative physical responses to overstimulating our mind and not allowing our mind to be bored, not allowing our mind to process and grow. Right. So one of the things I've been doing is I started calling it boredom practice. It'll be like when I'm pumping gas, instead of having my phone in my hand, I'll just stand there and I'll just watch the numbers on the pump. Sometimes I'll force myself to be bored,
Right.
or I'll look around and I'll take in the scenery and I'll just breathe and just accept that life is happening right now and there's really nothing going on.
Right.
You know, or standing in line at the store. There's 5 people in front of me. Typically, of the 5 people in front of me, 4 of them are on their phone. The 5th is at the cash register. Even sometimes that person's on their phone, right? So we've cultivated ourselves to such a need for constant stimulation that we can't pass the 2 minutes of standing in line behind people because we're bored.
Right.
Because we feel like we need that constant stimulation, and we forget that there's actually a very positive side to being bored.
Sure.
You know, letting ourselves just stand still.
Yeah.
It can make us more patient. It can make us less reactionary. We talk a lot about how to understand and respond cognitively instead of responding emotionally. Well, being bored is kind of an emotion. You know, it's our body's natural response to stimulus or lack thereof.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So responding logically to that and saying, I can literally just stand here and wait for 2 minutes for all this to go by. You know, it makes us less reactionary to situations. It makes us less prone to respond in anger or respond to our depressive feelings, our anxious feelings, right? So I feel like there's myriad reasons that it's very beneficial for us to just be bored sometimes.
Yeah. And you know, when it's easy enough, it sounds like it's easy to say, hey, I'm going to sit here for 2 minutes and do nothing. You know, and whatever thoughts come to mind. But you'd be surprised how difficult that is, you know, especially with, you know, the distractions of technology getting in the way. And, you know, because they understand, say, people that create these apps on our phone, they understand how the mind works. And they understand that constant need for stimulation. So they kind of feed off of that.
Right.
And in doing so, it almost trains our mind to be, we're unable to cope as well as we might be able to.
Right.
But, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one of the focuses of meditation, of Eastern style meditation, is nothingness. Is your mind literally focusing on nothing. That's the intention, is to focus on focusing on nothing, right? Almost paradoxical at first, right? Yeah. But as far as in the study of anxiety, right? Sitting still can be anxious because we feel like we're not in control of what's happening, or we're not actively moving forward, you know? But again, understanding it as a necessity to let our mind rest and let our mind recover as much as we, let our body recover.
I think, one of the things that comes to mind, think about back when you went to school and you were bored in class and the teacher was just droning on, and what would happen is you would start to get in your head and you would start to daydream. Yeah. And of course, this is something you would get in trouble for. But really, what is a daydream other than your imagination's turning on, your creativity turning on? Right. In creating different scenarios, putting yourself in different situations, and just general self-reflection. Yeah. So these are the things that we're keeping ourselves from. Every time that we dive in our phone, every time we look for distraction, to kind of cover that feeling of boredom. Yeah. We're cutting ourselves short.
Absolutely, and that kind of feeds back into the concept of learning, right? And what you kind of touched on earlier that I wanted to circle back to, and this is very critical, I think. And I've been studying this a lot more lately. What leads to productive learning and stuff, and in an academic environment, so like when you're in school and you get bored, most of the time it's because you're not being challenged, or you're being challenged too much. Right? So if you take a kid that doesn't know math, that doesn't know basic addition, and you put him in a calculus class, that kid's gonna get bored because no matter how good the teacher is, that kid's not gonna understand what's going on.
Right.
So they're gonna get bored. Or if you take a college level calculus student and you put them back in a basic addition, third, fourth grade, math, addition, subtraction, multiplication class, right? They're going to be bored because they're not being challenged enough, right? Sure. So a lot of times when you see kids that are diagnosed with ADHD, a lot of the time they're very, very intelligent and they're just not being challenged appropriately in school, right? So that leads to boredom because what we're doing in our daydreams is we're not just thinking about where we would rather be. We're putting ourselves in different situations. Sure. We're thinking critically. The joke about everybody has imaginary arguments in the shower.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the shower, you're probably not playing with your phone.
Right.
So your mind is putting itself in critical thinking situations.
Yep.
Where you have to figure out, you're creating a situation where you have to figure out how to beat this other person in an argument. So now you need to come up with one side of the argument, then you need to come up with a counter to that,
right.
And then whichever side of that you decide is the side you have to win, right? So you've created this very lush and this very real environment where you have to think critically. You're playing chess against yourself, right? So when you're in a situation where you're being understimulated intellectually and you start daydreaming, it's because you're yearning for a way to think critically, a way to apply this knowledge. Now, when you're in a situation that challenges you, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally, right? When you're in a situation that's challenging, but there's some hope of maybe being able to figure out, that's when you're the most engaged. That's when time flies, right? So if you're training martial arts, right? If you physically, in jiu-jitsu specifically, if you have to figure out how to configure your body in such a way that you're not gonna get strangled or you're not gonna get your arm broken, or you just want to get out from a position where the person's heavy on top of you, there's always some kind of hope. There's always a feeling of, okay, there has to be some way out of this. I know for a 100% fact there's a way out of this.
Right.
I have to figure it out.
Right.
And it's exciting. And it's difficult, and emotionally sometimes it's terrifying. Like the first time you have somebody crush your lungs and you can't breathe and you feel like you're drowning, it's one of the most terrifying feelings in the world.
Sure.
But through repetition, that you'll get better at it,
right?
And if you start getting bored with this situation, there's always some way that you can challenge yourself. If all right, well, I'm going to take this one concept that I learned, and I'm going to try to apply this one concept in every single situation I can. Like, I'm going to try to figure out how to isolate this person's arm, whether I'm on bottom, whether I'm on top, whether they're on my back, whether I'm on their back, whatever situation we're in. That's my goal today, is to try to take this one concept I know, critically think of how to apply it in multiple situations. So it's like the physical manifestation of what could be daydreaming.
A couple interesting points. The whole shower scenario. How many times do you hear people say, they get their best and biggest ideas in the shower? It's because you hop in the shower, there are no distractions. You go through the same repetitive motions, washing your hair, your body, or whatever else you do in the shower, and it frees the mind a little bit because you don't have to think about what you're doing.
Yes.
And it frees the mind to do that sort of problem solving,
right?
Or self-reflection or whatever is sitting kind of in your subconscious. So that makes a ton of sense.
I always like to use the example of Einstein developed the theory of relativity when he was working at a patent office. Right, he just had some mundane ass job.
Right.
One day he's doing his job. So like you said, you're going through these repetitive motions. Your body knows what to do. Your mind knows what to do. So you're kind of distracted with these mundane tasks. But in the back of your brain, the higher functioning part of your consciousness is free to make these new connections. It's free to play. It's free to try new things. You're in a situation where you can't make any mistakes in that level. You know, which I think is very, very critical. When you're in the shower, if if mentally you make a wrong connection to a hypothesis you've been working on, there's no negative consequence to it. You know, it's not like you're in front of your peers. It's not like you're vocalizing all this stuff. You're just letting your mind play.
Right.
You know, there's no consequence to play. There's no consequence in that boredom.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And you mentioned sometimes that when you get bored, it's the need for putting yourself in a different scenario to utilize those. And it reminds me of last time I went down to the city to see my brother. You know, he lives in this beautiful fucking high rise.
Yeah.
And you go up to the top, to the rooftop, and you're overlooking the harbor, and you see Madison Square Garden on one side and all these beautiful things. And he's like, oh man, we don't come up here that often anymore.
Yeah.
Unless someone new is in town.
Yeah.
And now we get to revisit it and re-see it with different eyes. You know, when it's almost like exciting again for them.
Yeah.
And that happens so often. You know, things that are like even just the river walk right over here.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I've been to it so many times, sometimes it just doesn't even cross my mind.
Yeah.
Until someone else comes to town and I'm trying to think of, what's unique about the area to go and show them. And I'm like, oh, well, shit, water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Water.
Water. Yeah, always water.
That's so one concept that struck me really profoundly last summer, and it's been very present in my mind ever since, is the notion of seeing something old with new eyes. And I'll do that some mornings. Honestly, one of the most beautiful views in the city is once you get off 81, you're coming down Coffeen Street. So it's like really early in the morning, and the sun's kind of just coming up, and the sky's all red, and you can see the landscape of the city. You can see the rolling of the hills and stuff kind of far from the distance. You can see for a long ways.
Yep.
And for what the city can be sometimes, it's actually a very breathtaking view. It's one of my favorite things, and every single time it catches my attention, I try to breathe in and just take it in as if it's all brand new.
Yeah.
Or I'll go sit at Thompson Park or go to the river walk, and every time I go there, I try to make myself very present. I try to look at something. I try to find a new detail, or I try to find something refreshing, or find something that I've been overlooking.
Sure.
And try to push myself to appreciate it in a brand new way.
Yep.
Because it's very easy to overlook beautiful things and become bored with your surroundings.
Yep.
And that because of the repetition, because you see it every single day and it just falls into the background.
Yeah.
And
and I know we've talked about before, some early mornings or even late nights running up to Thompson Park to catch that view off that one corner.
Right.
And the overlook, because I can go up there and I can see the same layout, same landscape. But if I go up there and try and take it all in, and at the same time I'm thinking about, the day of or prior, or maybe what's coming up, and I'm utilizing those feelings and experiences with this beautiful view, in which maybe I would just get bored with just the view alone. But to utilize all those things together and appreciate it for what it is and how you see it now, changes everything. It looks different every single time. So I might snap a picture, and to everybody else, it's like, oh, well, shit, that's the same picture you posted yesterday. But to me, I'm like, nah, because this time I snapped a picture. I've got this and this going on. And this was on my mind.
It's in that case, it's not necessarily the surroundings, but it's who you are too. Because you're different. Because you're not the same person that was there yesterday. You're not the same person that was there the day before.
Right.
That old saying of you never step in the same river twice.
Yeah.
Because it's always moving.
Constantly
it's
moving.
always changing. Yeah. And again, I mean, you mentally, your focus, where your mind's at, where your heart's at, where your breath is at, what kind of commotion is going on. Maybe one day you go up there because you need to get somewhere that's quiet. Maybe that day it's that quiet reprieve for you. And you look around, and that's how it feels, and that's how that picture is going to look to you. The colors are always a little bit different. The clouds are always different. The commotion's always different. Sometimes you go up there because you need to get out of your house. You need to be around something a little more vivid and alive. You know.
Right.
So in any given day, depending on where we're at mentally, where we're at physically, the temperature outside, the humidity, the breeze, all these myriad different things can change. And if you look on every scene every single day that way, truly nothing is ever the same.
No.
You know?
Not at all. Not at all. And that in itself is inspiring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
It's all the way inspiring.
Absolutely. Something that just kind of struck my mind is one habit that I have is I park in the same parking spot every single day when I get here. I park in the exact same spot. I pull in, I back in, same spot every single day. If somebody's in my spot, I have backup plans. I have 4 or 5 different backup plans based on the possible configurations that I've run into, right? So when I get here every morning or every afternoon, I know exactly where I'm going to park. Which that's repetitive, and it's pretty boring, right? Just, I have my own parking spot. It seems maybe kind of silly too, but what's interesting about stuff like that is I don't have to think about where I'm going to park. So that frees my mind up to make a new decision, to make a good decision for the day. There have been studies, and I'm not exactly sure how they conducted this study or how they decided what's a good decision and what's a bad decision, but there were a few studies that all seem to come to the same conclusions, that our mind is capable of a finite number of good decisions in a day. So if we have to waste critical thinking skills on deciding where we're going to park or what we're going to wear or what we're going to eat for lunch, that actually detracts from our ability to make good decisions based on like how are we going to train, how are we going to react in this road rage situation, how are we going to act when there's boredom, how are we going to act to new stimulus. If so you see like high level people, they talk about like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and stuff, and these guys have habits like they know exactly what they're going to wear every single day. They know where they're going to park. They know how they're going to walk up the stairs. They're very like silly things that don't seem like they would need to be regimented.
Sure.
High level people have regimented these things so they don't need to waste their time thinking about it.
Sure.
So in my efforts to do that, I've regulated where I'm going to park. I know on Monday nights when I coach jiu-jitsu class, this is the gi I wear. I know on Tuesday afternoon when I coach jiu-jitsu class, this is the gi I wear. This is when I do my laundry, and that's my structure for the week. So outside of that, my mind is free to play.
Sure.
It's being in the shower, but all the time.
Yeah. No, interesting, man. I definitely want to look that up. Because I wonder if that would stand up in court. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, sorry,
no,
officer.
absolutely.
I already made all the good decisions possible today. So I can't help it, man. It's science. It's science.
Scientifically speaking, I had to speed because I couldn't make a good decision on that.
But, now that I think about it, and, I try and have my routines already locked in for the morning.
Right.
So I can go through that whole process, and I'm not utilizing any more of my energy or my thought that I need to. So now the day is fresh, and I can, come across something new, come up with something new.
Right.
That's a very cool way of looking at it.
Yeah, and so now think of a day where you miss your morning routine. It feels like it throws your whole day off because these things that were so automatic, you actually had to spend 4 or 5 extra decisions kind of righting that ship.
Yep.
And the rest of the day, you're like, oh fuck, your mind can only make 1 or 2 more good decisions that day, and you don't know what to spend it on,
And and I go through it all the time. Maybe if I miss the gym one morning, usually that time isn't spent that productively. My time. I'll hop on my phone more often, or whatever else, because I'm so used to doing it a certain way.
Right. You're so used to a certain stimulation. We don't have that. You get bored.
Right, and you quickly fill it instead of embracing that boredom.
Yeah.
But I've got a friend who goes and like dog sits, goes to different houses and dog sits on the side, and she's got a good routine and good patterns. But when she would go and stay over at these people's house to watch the dogs, it throw that routine off.
Yeah.
And she'd almost she would be upset and almost like not know what to do with herself. So I mean, that's just it's an interesting way to look at it. Right. And and I would tell her, I'm like, don't, it's nothing to stress over. And really, I'm telling myself at the same time, it's nothing to stress over. Embrace it and utilize what you do have. Right. You know what I mean? To continue on, to press forward.
Right. So that runs into very interesting things. So we just spent a few minutes talking about how beneficial it is to develop repetitive patterns and develop good habits and stuff. But we also see very clearly the negatives of when that pattern is thrown off.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's very important to keep in mind that we have that flexibility. Right?
Yeah.
Because we have to treat ourselves like we would treat other people. And this is something I've been talking to myself a lot about lately. Very specifically, I'm usually pretty diligent about, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday mornings. That's when I do my strength training stuff. If I have a client, I'm always here on time. I'm here early. I'm always trying to be here early before my clients.
Yeah.
For me, that feels very compulsive. Like I have to do that. But if I don't have a client that morning and it's just, okay, well, I got to get to the gym. I'm going to work out before classes start. Then I always end up here 15 to 20 minutes after the intended time.
Right.
I don't get the same workout in that I wanted to, and I get, inevitably I get frustrated. I'm like, what the fuck? Like I need to treat myself like I'm a client. I need to get there early for myself. I need to show up and be prepared.
Sure.
And the mornings that I do that, I have a much better workout. I'm much more content and stuff. But that runs back into the flexibility with ourselves. Is if I was late for a client, my client would forgive me. Every time I've ever been late, my client's been no problem. It's not a big deal. I get frustrated with myself, but I know they're not frustrated with me. Every time one of my clients has been late, they're apologetic, and I genuinely, it's fine. I understand shit happens, So I need to have that flexibility with myself to understand that if I'm late once in a while, it's okay, but I still need to hold myself to that standard of I should still be on time for myself.
Sure.
So the flexibility in okay, we have our set schedule, we have our set rhythm. If something happened that throws that off, we can't hold ourselves to such a stringent standard that we freak out about that.
Sure.
Because if it happened to anybody else, we would tell them to relax.
Right.
It's not worth freaking out about.
Yeah, and that's a bad habit I have as well. Once one thing goes wrong, or if I, I'll keep bringing it back to the phone. If I wake up in the morning and hop on my phone first thing,
right,
and tend to that for however long, so I miss a little bit of my morning routine.
Yeah.
Then I'll get in the funk, and what happens?
Yeah.
Just stay on the phone longer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just keeps snowballing from there.
Yeah.
But to be able to let it go, to forgive yourself,
Right.
or to relax.
Yeah.
Just relax and just utilize still what you can. Still the time that you have is important. I mean, and that's been one of the main things that I've had to overcome, because it's so easy to, once things get out of sync, just continue that out.
Yeah.
Just keep going and going.
Yeah. Well, understanding that there's a point where you can just reset your day. If you stop and you say, okay, my day's been really scattered, really shitty. It's not exactly what I wanted to, but from here on out, I can try to find some semblance of order and some, kind of notion of discipline.
Yeah.
With it,
Absolutely, and it happens often for me coming into the weekend or out of the weekend, and and sometimes it's harder to get back in that routine. Yeah. And I was telling you last night, I was looking forward to the session today. I was looking forward to the K-Side Convos today, because this resets me. This makes me focus, makes me very present. I can't be anywhere else right now. Because I have shit to do, this, stuff at hand. And it's needed, because, as the repetition, over and over, you get that low, you start to get bored, you start picking up other habits, and, which is okay. I didn't really, take it out on myself, but I'm aware of it. And I'm also aware that Tuesdays, I know I got to get right back to it. If we missed the gym yesterday. Also got called into work a little bit early, but I didn't stress over it. Didn't try and do more than what the universe was offering me at the time. And knowing that Tuesday I was going to be right back at it, doing this again. So
man, it's so critical to have that flexibility and that understanding built in, because repetition brings boredom, right? Boredom brings distraction. We want to fill that boredom, right? And so that takes us out of what we've decided are our good habits. It takes us out of our natural rhythm for our life, and we can feel when we're out of sync. And that rhythm brings frustration, it can build anxiety, it can bring that desire for a structure. And then knowing that we, you know, instead of getting frustrated and letting it snowball and further going down that slippery slope, we can have hard resets in our life. Like, okay, for you, you know, again, I know Tuesday morning, I'm going to get back in my rhythm. I'm going to get back in my stride. And that desire for that structure and putting that first piece back in place, that's going to start rebuilding that habit or that cycle, that repetitive structure of your life.
Sure.
Which again, you know is going to inevitably lead to boredom, or something's going to happen that's going to distract us from that. Something's going to happen to take us out of our rhythm. If we get frustrated with the fact that that is a completely, like, part of the rhythm is being taken out of your rhythm. Part of the flow is being taken out of your flow, you know? And if you get frustrated, if you get mad, you lose that. One of the biggest things I tell my students, I say, the second you get frustrated, you stop learning. As soon as you get frustrated, you stop learning. As soon as you get frustrated, that means it's time to stop, to breathe, to figure out why you're frustrated, and be accepting of, like you said, what the universe is offering you, what the situation is offering you.
Sure.
You know?
And you know, because that frustration and that whole cycle from repetition to boredom to you know, frustration and back around to structure, that helps you to adapt the routine.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you know, the same patterns and the same routines only going to get you to the same place.
Right.
Although it might be a different place or further than you were the day before, a month before. Eventually, where you are now, you're still going to need to progress from.
Right.
So to go through that whole process, you know, you realize where you need to adapt.
Right.
And a lot of that realization comes from that place of boredom, from that place of the mind drifting, using your imagination and creativity, and re-inspiring yourself and re-motivating yourself to maybe what your new goals are, what adjustments you need to make to the routine, and then back into that structure again, and it starts all over.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So how do we decide when it's time to move forward? How do we know when it's time to break that repetitive cycle? Right. It's when we're bored. Right. It's when we're not growing anymore. It's when we're not being challenged. It's when our comfort zone has adapted to where we are. It's when our comfort zone has grown to encompass where we are now.
Sure.
And that's when we get bored, because we're not being properly challenged. Right. I do this thing when I'm working with students. Try to recognize the point when we hit that point of diminishing returns. Right, I think is always the sign that it's time to move on.
I like that term.
Because what happens, and you see this in everything you do. You see this in weightlifting. You see it in martial arts. I'm sure you've seen it when you're writing. I've felt it when I'm playing music and stuff before. Always at the beginning, there's a huge growth, and that's when it's exciting because you see that growth. Then it always stagnates and it starts to plateau a little bit, right? We've talked about the importance of fighting through plateaus. We've talked about different strategies, how to push through that plateau and continue that upward growth, right? But what happens is, especially, and you see this in shorter cycles, so you see this in like a 1 hour training routine a lot, when you're doing a lot of repetitions of the same thing, you grow and then you plateau a little bit, and then you'll actually see the students start to regress. And you touched on this when you were talking about trying to memorize a verse. And as soon as you hit that point where you start to regress, it's time to go somewhere else.
That's where you stop,
right? And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll shift to a completely different drill. If we were working on something that's very footwork intensive, I'll go to just a hand combination, like a head movement drill, or just something completely off the wall, something that I know the student knows, something that I know that they like, and we'll just hammer that out for a while. And then once their mind has had time in the back of their head, they're doing something they know, right? This is a shower scenario all over again, right? They're doing a combination they've done 10,000 times. It's automatic. They enjoy it. It's fun. They don't have to think about it. When we come back to this 10 to 15 minutes later, boom, all of a sudden they have the drill down.
It's there.
Right.
You know, and I noticed that with sleep.
Yeah.
If I stop what it is I'm doing, and like you said, you could do just something completely different.
Yes.
You know, switch your entire focus, or let your mind rest.
Right.
And I'd wake up the next day and it was there like it was magic. You're like, oh,
yeah.
You know, so I mean, it's working when you're not even aware that it's working.
Yeah. So the way I visualize it and the way I think about it is when we So all learning is developing neural pathways in your
Right.
mind, right? What happens is when you want to learn a song or a movement or whatever you're trying to learn, anything you're trying to learn, you want to learn it from A to B.
Right.
Like there's one most efficient way to do this. You want to go from point A to point B, and that's it. So as you're learning it, you walk this path from A to B, from A to B, from A to B, from A to B. And essentially, it starts wearing the ground down there,
Sure.
and it starts digging a ditch, right? So you're just wearing this basically just this ditch in your mind,
Right.
and that's a rut, right? And that's the only way you can go. And your wheels are stuck in there, and that's it. You can't get out of that, right? So what happens when you allow yourself to play is you actually let your mind get out of that rut, and it can go from A to C back to B, from A to E to C to B, and then back and forth in all these different pathways. You allow it to work and play and do it wrong or do it right or find a more effective way that makes sense to you.
Right.
Right? Which, I mean, sometimes you can hear the same thing 10,000 times, and that 10,000th time, all of a sudden it's going to click.
Right.
Because in between hearing that, your mind is playing with different avenues of this. And it's as important as it is to do something correct and efficiently, it's also important to do it incorrectly. Right? And understanding that there's not, especially in martial arts, there's not really a wrong way to do it. And I tell my students all the time, there's no wrong way necessarily, but there are consequences to what you do.
Sure.
If you throw your jab and you bring your hand back down to your belly, the consequence for that a lot of times is going to be getting punched in the face. I don't care if you do it, that's fine.
Sure.
I'm going to show you this is the most efficient way to do this, but experiment with it in a way that I'm not telling you.
Right.
Move in a way that I'm telling you not to, because you need to understand and appreciate the consequence of it.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. That's a good way to learn.
Yeah.
And, but it does. It inspires adaptability. Just like you
Right.
parking in the same place every day.
Right.
When you come and someone's parked in that spot, I mean, you could lose your if you didn't have that adaptability.
Right.
Sure, you would. It almost would be irrational.
Right.
Right.
Right, and exactly. I mean, for me, that's my A to B.
Right.
Like I want to get there. I want to park in my spot. If that's not there, parking in another spot for me, metaphorically, is not the most efficient thing to do. But I understand that I can do it another way, still accomplish my task of parking my vehicle,
Right.
and getting out of it for the day. The most important thing is that I'm here and I'm coming into the gym. So that little nuance is just something that, okay, if my spot's open, boom, this is efficient, it's easy.
Sure.
The consequence of not doing it that way is I park in a different spot.
Right.
There's no great loss to it.
Right.
But I've experimented with different ways of doing it. I've experimented with a right and a wrong way.
Yeah. Several episodes back, I remember we were talking about, I had mentioned something about one of the, through my experience of throwing shows, one of the things that brought my stress levels all the way down was that I would leave room for change.
Yeah.
I wasn't so strict as far as when people would perform, when they'd stop, when the next would be on, whatever else. I would leave room in between that, because if something screws up or if someone drops, now instead of being stressed because all I know is from A to B, A to B, A to B, now I can adapt to the situation,
Right.
and I'm more flexible and fluid,
Right.
and that brings my stress levels way down, performer stress levels, and of
Right.
course, the people that come to the show,
Yeah.
make it more enjoyable for them.
Right. Well, and so that brings back into the matter of efficiency. Yes, the most efficient way to run the show would be boom,
Bah, bah,
on a
bah.
set schedule.
Sure.
Everything's on and off at these times, and that would be great. But that's hypothetical. That's theoretical.
Right.
When you take that theory and you apply it to a real situation,
Right.
there has to be adaptation.
Yeah.
Right? So knowing that in a real life situation, this is not feasible. It doesn't make sense to stress yourself about drilling something that efficiently,
Right.
because in a real application, the odds of that happening are 0.1%.
Sure. Shit happens.
Exactly.
Shit happens. Life
Exactly.
happens. And it goes back to things that are in our control and things that are not in our control.
Right.
And controlling what you can, but also being able to let go of the things that you can't.
Right.
Works wonders, man.
Absolutely.
Works wonders.
Yeah. And that was something that took me a while to learn with martial arts too, is I would drill, You know, I'll drill a combination a very specific way, jab, cross, hook. This is how I'm going to throw it. You know, throw a little slip in there. Okay, this is how the combination is supposed to go. You get into a real life situation, I only have control of 50% of what happens in a sparring match, in a fight. You know, my opponent has more control over what happens. You know, so yeah, okay, I can drill this in a very strict, in a very like structured form, kind of like in a very karate-esque, like this is where my punches go, this is how my body moves. But when you amplify the variables, you add in so many variables, you add in an entirely different human being that wants to do everything they can to fuck up what you're trying to do. You have to be, you know, you have to be versatile, you have to be adaptable. And what I had to come to understand was that it's not going to look the same when I do it live. It's got to look similar. The body mechanics have to be roughly the same. I still want to make sure that my hand goes to the correct target, but it's not going to look beautiful. You know, and every once in a while you can watch UFC highlight reels and you can see the most beautiful knockouts ever. But you want, like, they take a 5-second clip of a 25-minute fight sometimes, and they say, oh, look at this movement, look how he set this up, this is textbook. But you look at the other, you know, 24 minutes and 55 seconds, and it's, oh, I can see what he's trying to accomplish here, and that doesn't look anything like the way they drilled it in the gym. You know? But you have to know 100% efficiency, what the best possible way to do it is, and what a good enough way it is. You know, what's going to be effective in a real life situation. You know? So running your shows with that kind of fluidity and that margin of error is realistically the most efficient way to do it. You know?
Exactly. You know, and it reminds me of, so we were just watching that UFC fight on Saturday. It was Israel and Romero. And I don't know how many of you guys have watched it or even know the reference, but there are two, it was a title fight, two individuals with opposing styles. And, you know, one was a kickboxer, calculated strikes, good defense, and the other dude was just kind of like, he just a bully.
Pitbull?
Just a bully, you know? Just likes to get into those street fight, you know, type. And everybody watching, this was a big event, everybody watching, waiting for it to just blow up into these fireworks, saw the opposite. Like I was telling you, there was one punch thrown in the first round and maybe just a couple in the second round. And so the entire crowd that was watching, they were booing. They're like, we paid, you know, this amount of money. We came and traveled all the way to Vegas. We want to see something. We want to see a fight. We want to be entertained. But for the individuals themselves that were in the ring, this is almost like a, you know, I don't want to, almost like a life and death thing. At least speaking of their livelihood, let alone.
If you want to see how life and death it is, go watch one of Yoel Romero's highlight reels or watch one of Israel Adesanya's highlight reels, man. Both of these men are absolute machines of destruction. They're terrifying individuals. Absolutely.
And so what they were doing, because nobody wants to be destroyed on live national television, but they were in their mind adapting their usual styles to the individual. And not only so, they adapted it prior to the fight, you could tell. But
theoretical adaptations.
Abstract adaptations. But then they also had to apply it again and change it once again once they were in the fight, and change it even from round to round. And if you were an actual fan of the art or had any experience in it, you could see that that's what they were doing. It was more a chess match in their movements, their movement or their lack thereof. So for a lot of people, it was a boring match to watch. But for some people, I mean, it was almost just as exciting. You know, because it was, because there really are levels to it. You know, there are levels to the understanding and that sort of adaptation to it.
Well, kind of like you said, I mean, every time Israel tried to engage, Romero would counter.
But that's all Romero would do. Because he knew if he came in, you know, Israel would be able to catch him too. So I think Israel ended up winning that fight because he was able to adapt on the spot continuously, while Romero had just adapted his style to that fight, to the idea of that fight. So he wasn't able to continually adapt throughout the fight. and ended up just getting caught more times.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. And so that kind of goes to the notion of being understimulated or being overstimulated. Like, obviously, nobody's ever going to say that was an exciting fight, you know. And even people who are, you know, true fans and students of the art and stuff say, "Come on, man, you fucking want to see these guys throw down." You know, it's super hyped up. It should have, by all accounts, should have been an amazing fight. But if you really understand what's going on, like you said, you can appreciate the nuances of it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't fully understand boxing or kickboxing and stuff, all you see are two guys standing there.
Right.
So intellectually you're not stimulated. So you're bored. You know, if all you want to see is a blood fest and that's all that's going to stimulate your mind, there's no appreciation for that. It's the same thing as when guys bitch about grapplers in MMA. Guys that'll just push you up against the wall. Guys like Khabib that'll just push you up against the wall or take you down and just grind the shit out of you for 25 minutes.
Right.
If you've ever been in that situation, you have a true appreciation for how bad that sucks.
Sure.
But if you've never been there, you don't think it takes any skill,
Right.
so you get bored with it.
Right.
You know?
You don't know how tiring it is. You don't know that if one wrong move could get you locked up, get your arm broken, get you know, whatever.
Yep. So it's interesting to see, and again, I'm not going to say I'm the most knowledgeable dude on stuff like that, or that I wouldn't have also liked to see.
Sure.
These legends of growing legends of the sport freaking go in there and throw down, but you do have to appreciate what it was for what it was.
I mean, and this is the end of the fight, and we're all amped up. There have been good fights, prior to it.
That female championship fight before
Wild.
with Zhang and Joanna, right?
Was everything that you wanted it to be. And so, of course, people had high expectations. So I'm not gonna lie, we were throwing stuff at the TV. But once we settled into it, and I think, like you said, to appreciate it for what it was, I think is is a better response to it. But sometimes that's just how it goes, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I would say, just something to keep in mind. The fact that boredom is a natural process to be embraced because there's a lot to be learned through it and from it. And, staying away from distractions, allowing yourself to be bored, allowing yourself to be re-inspired and to build new structures and get back into repetition.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind that repetition builds understanding, and understanding can help us stave off boredom. Because you truly understand something, then you can start conceptually extrapolating details and applying them in new situations and playing, because playtime is going to prevent boredom as well. And the more you understand things, the more you can play with it, the more you can let your mind busy itself with even again, shower arguments, but it does take that repetitive cycle. It takes all those reps. It takes being bored sometimes, but it's all part of the process of learning how to challenge ourselves and grow.
So trust in that process, guys.
Absolutely, man. Thank you guys for joining us. See you next week.
Peace.